From what I've seen, I feel like our perception of how we cultivate daily life is pretty much goddamn like pessimistic. I can't tell you how many times I've been in numerous or like endless situations where I felt this unapologetic need to be myself, whether that comes in the form of being extroverted pretty much at the fringe of like embarrassing either myself or the people who were just as audacious as I am to spend time with me. Well, either way, I did enjoy doing that. Not once have I ever regretted it every time I did do it. And honestly, I love being myself. I love being the bundle of past experiences and environments that has had intersecting yet newly developed patterns of life of the era I was going to inhabit that either in whole or in part has influenced the way I interpret real life and common human interactions made into man. Well, there's some truth to like the structural aspects of uh, why slowly but surely there's just been a loss of interest. I feel like times are trifling as hell, and I'm kind of not afraid to admit that, like in the face of the uncertainty that the world provides, even under the administration I'm under, like it flashes like an existential jump scare every now and then. Like it just goes to show that there's a bunch of stuff that we're afraid of these days. Unemployment rates are very much garbage, and I keep getting fear mongering posts, whether on social media and discourse, or all types of news articles saying that Gen Z might as well live under the same bridge that rage bait trolls try to catch their next victim in. But in everyday interaction, and with like preconceived notions that other regular everyday people have, we've even been like, I've noticed we've been like super saturated about even the most like mundane topic that I don't even think matters at this point. Like for example, the conversation of whether looks matter. Like that's just been so accelerated to a point where the most decently gorgeous person you encounter in any social circle that you happen to be invited in will be seen as like chopped through the meat grinder of like looks maxing trends. I mean, honestly, I can't tackle the structural parts alone. Like even being a poli sci student that loves studying that stuff, I'd rather much leave that to like the master's researcher students or just the experts in general. I think what I'm going to try to decipher instead is how the fall from grace that we've had, if any, like led us, like how that led us towards like such an entitled, unempathetic, and for lack of a better description, dangerously nonchalant outlook on so many things in our everyday life that leaves like no fulfilling or welcoming space for those that we should be more compassionate towards, with those people being either our own family members, prospective meaningful people that we didn't know we wanted in our lives, or just complete strangers that we should think twice about. I kind of think it comes down to three specific things: the effectiveness of short form content for any topic ever, the hyper binary view of age expectations of a culture that endorses this unrealistic model of contributing like to the state's economy or capital, if you want to call it that, as young as humanly possible, and then probably something I'll be a little more broad on, just the fear of time. Starting with short form content, everybody knows it's dangerous. You and I both know it's dangerous. It reduces your attention span to where many have admitted, like all sorts of online social circles, that they cannot for the life of them sit down. Like it's gotten so bad that they can't even sit down to watch a full movie. Like that's considered a chore to them. Like it literally makes them mentally uncomfortable and immediately fatiguing once they even have like the idea to do such a thing. I think like when one gets conditioned to indulge in that kind of short form content, there's like it just lacks any specific analyzation or like intent to analyze things. Like let alone watching a video that has like no other purpose than to overactivate your dopamine receptors. And obviously that means that your the things that make your reasoning for more complicated topics that happen to have patterns that you need to decipher and come to a conclusion on, those are going to kind of get tainted. They're not really going to be as strong as if you had just, done something more like with backbone, such as reading a book or reading an article or just reading in general. All that type of stuff that we need for, for the development of ourselves, and hopefully one day it doesn't come to this point, but like for our literal own survival, is embarrassingly confined by the short form content we have today. And it puts us to an unhealthy status where we now find ourselves needing to escape from that when that originally was the actual escape that we thought it was, and at least in the time that we first saw it in. the problem I find myself like in regards to the second thing, which is like this age accelerationist thing, is that like I'm not a fan of how we perceive our worth based on the statuses we've been chasing for like a meaningful portion of our lives. That would require like that you and I both know would require way more years of us than this like imaginary finish line in culture before we're often dismissed as that, you know, that insulting ass label about being an unk. Like it literally you cross that line, all of a sudden you have this sort of time limit that you've failed to fulfill, where you're no longer able to express your youthful characteristics that remind you of a simpler time in your life. Like you could literally be smiling in like the most obvious of places, and then somebody's gonna check you and be like, "Bro, you a grown ass man enjoying yourself?" Like, come on, bro. That's just not right. I am not a fan of that. I hope we get to see less of that soon. Well, typically the so-called deadline is to like just do these amazing accolades and achievements before you reach the age of 25. And I've even had some people like tell me that the goal is to do it before 21. Like, bro, be for real. To do all that stuff before it's too late, or like if you don't do it, your life is perceived as over. All that stuff. I won't lie, I kind of fell into this sort of thinking a couple years ago, and looking back, I kind of don't blame myself. I mean, who wouldn't want to? Who wouldn't? It's not that they want to fall into that, but who wouldn't like get trapped in that at some point in their lives? You know, with these like, structural problems that I was talking about, it's constantly shoved in our faces with in all sorts of spaces. Like one cannot help but want to both like in an ambitious and a hilariously nihilistic sense, come up with this sort of like unrealistic yet almost noble drive to mimic this Horatio Alger myth that overnight, because it's been done before, even when like we fail to see that it's like akin to like a very minuscule chance of happening, or for us to replicate such stories, that like we could seek a position in our lives where anyone, irrespective of where you came from, that with enough hard work, virtue, and grit, you can acclaim fame, success, and other rising lust for like an imaginably high status and influence that comes with all that stuff. Well, I mean, when you see all these news outlets and they're saying that they have like an empirically backed source for all the things that are going wrong right now, be it a house or like an unemployed spot in one's own life that comes with the manageable income, no doubt all that's left to do is to come up with like this imaginary finish line with how we wish we could take the easy way out through this overnight success story or tale, no matter how delusional we know we sound. I think all these things intertwine together, and I think those last two that I just mentioned definitely intertwine to get to the more broader conversation, which is the last topic I want to talk about. And I do want to be broad about it because I'd rather much give my true input as it pertains to the young, marginalized person I am today, instead of trying to reason with that of which I know is like a universal feeling and will always be uncertain. You know, like there's no point trying to get anywhere near empirical for that type of stuff. Time is scary. Time is frightening. The matter of growing up in modern America with like negative outlooks on what we consider impactful in our very own livelihood and autonomies, being commodified to like a dangerous degree so that it can be served to the youth social media outlets to consume, is gonna influence like a fear of like this inevitable yet undetectable, like you can feel it but you don't see it for yourself, transition to gaining major responsibilities of our own autonomies when it's finally our turn to take a crack at adulthood. I don't blame those who feel like growing up is like to be perceived not as a journey to becoming a self-actualized citizen for a state that like cannot for the life of it fixate on like a universal standard to ensure human security before national security, out of the fear of how it's perceived towards neighboring states, but to exist instead as like meat for the grinder, and to be expected to like be complacent with its national values, with the people up there is like the elite's values, that honestly in all, and you and I both know this too, never really feel like it's in the interest of how it can possibly impact our very own backyard. You know, how we raise our kids, if we even choose to have any at this rate. Well, I mean, as far as I know, to conclude, my response is that I consider my own version of a revolution to all this to be like a prioritization of both maintaining a patient process of self-care and anything external to that, specifically that which contributes to causes that promote community towards those who have a history of needing it the most, and anyone who continues or is newly found to be marginalized by these burdens that I've talked about today. At least with what I alone, with my own hands and voice, can control locally, instead of like constantly feeding into this mirage painted as fear that which we consider the bigger picture tries to enforce on us. My meaning derives towards the subjective experiences that I've had in spite of the temporariness of it all, not because of the temporariness of it all. The fact that there is an ending that can be considered limited just because we only have a set or like estimated fixed amount of years doesn't make me believe that life is all the more worth taking my sweet time on. Specifically, I mean, me personally, I see it as like a middle finger response to that limited view. My true meaning is found that in these unique and irreplaceable aspects, traits, and concepts of myself, my identity, that I have the full right to execute. I will create and unravel unforgettable stories and accomplishments that, without my presence, would have never in any statistical sense occurred otherwise. Even if I have like a limited amount of time to do so.